Welcome to the Webinar Talk Show. I'm Eliz Green.
And I'm Tom Singer. And you know what, Eliz? I am so stoked about this year and what we are able to do with the Webinar Talk Show and really in the whole meetings business. 10 months ago when this pandemic hit, many people were out of work or their work had ground to a halt. And many people had to figure out what can we do to sort of pivot, as they say, sort of reinvent ourselves and to find ways to put ourselves out there and better ourselves. In fact, you and I did this by founding the Webinar Talk Show last April as a way to showcase this whole idea that interviews are often better than a talking head over PowerPoint. But our guests today did something amazing for the meetings business, and that is they created a course on how to be pandemic compliant with COVID and so much more. And I'm so excited to hear what they did and how it's serving that meetings industry.
Well, and I think that's an important point, is that everything we've done, and certainly what our three guests have done, is serving the meetings industry in a really elegant and innovative way. I'm just excited. So I'm going to introduce our guests quickly because we have so much to talk about, especially...
And there's so many guests.
I know, three. We've never had three guests. This is our first three guests. We've had more guests than that, but never just three. So we have three meeting industry professionals with us today. Marianne Urbanovich is a meeting planner. She plans global healthcare events for HMP Communications. We also have Shannon Majewski, who's the education program head for the Department of Pathology at the Medical College of Wisconsin. Yay, right in my own hometown. And then we have Heather Seaschultz, who is the Director of America Operation for the Drug Information Association. This is important to note. They are all in the healthcare world, which makes sense that they would really be interested in making it possible for meeting professionals to be better prepared to have COVID-compliant meetings. Welcome, everybody, to the Webinar Talk Show.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for joining us.
So we all met virtually at Spin. Tom and I have talked about the wonderful senior industry meeting or senior planner industry network event that we had in December. And you all reached out to us and said, we think we have something people need to know about. So Marianne, let's start here. Tell us what happened that led to this pandemic compliance advisor training.
Unemployment led to this. Simple. So many of us in our industry have faced that over the last year. Slowdown of work, the same things you guys face. Slowdown of work, stoppage of work. Heather and I were unemployed at the time. We were, as I've mentioned, trying to keep our heads in the game.
Right.
Not get bogged down, not get pulled down in the negativity of that we're quarantined and everything else, but say, hey, we're going to come through this. And so we went ahead and stumbled upon a course called the COVID Compliance Officer Training, which was done by Health Educational Services. And it was done in response to the LA County coming out with a regulation that said, we'll let you open back up, but we want to be sure that there's processes in place. So they designed a course to deal with that. Heather and I took the course, and about 10, 15 minutes into it, I'm like, there's so many parallels. We're not the same industry, but we're similar in many ways. So what can we do? So I reached out to Health Education Services, and Juliana Bronner, who's the president of the company, and said, hey, would you work with us to go ahead and create a course and change it all up? I pulled Heather in because of the three of us here on the call. She has the most name recognition. And so I said, are you in? And she goes, of course I'm in. And then both of us had met Shannon through a Facebook planner group. And she was asking questions about what we'd done. And I'm like, well, we're dragging you in with us too, girlfriend. So here you go, the trio of us.
So that course that you originally took, it was designed for like the television and film industry being able to open up and create content. And what you did is something that is so smart and so many people need to do. And that is, you saw a parallel between two unrelated industries and said, wait, that would work over here. And then you ran with it. And that's entrepreneurship in its purest form.
I guess.
No, it absolutely is.
We're looking, for us, we're all three CMPs. And, it's giving back to our industry. And that's what we do.
So let's talk about that.
There were parallels with, audiovisual is film and set. So we're kind of positioning it that way. But also another need is we saw all these resources out there, but nobody collecting them into one thing to help us planners put something together. Like Marianne had a great idea of bringing this group together.
Well, we talked to planners quite a bit, and there's a lot of stress and fear around, is it safe? How do I do that face-to-face meeting, even if it's the face-to-face part that's a smaller component of a hybrid meeting? There's a lot to know. So Shannon, tell us a little bit about what's the benefit to a meeting professional of going through this training, and you can receive an accreditation, right?
Absolutely. So by completing the course and completing the quiz, you receive a certificate so that you are a pandemic compliance advisor. But more importantly, not just the certificate or the certificate itself, but it's the information behind it, and it's empowering people to be consistent across the industry. And I think, as we studied for our CMP, we all know this. What is one of those main purposes of the CMP program? It's to create this higher level of consistency across the industry. So as we were communicating with one another and compiling information, I also took the pandemic compliance officer course through Health Education Services, because I was in a position where I was furloughed. I was anticipated to be going back, but I thought, okay, if I'm going to be doing any live meetings whatsoever, how am I going to go about doing that? How do you make sure people are safe? And we're always concerned as planners about liability on top of that. So not only do you want to make sure your people are safe, you want to make sure you're safe, right?
Right.
So in collecting information, I also took the Johns Hopkins contact tracing course. Not that I ever thought that I would want to be a contact tracer, but I would want to know what the protocols were for that. So the three of us just kept learning and grabbing all kinds of information and compiling it, and we kept sharing things with one another. Did you see this? Have you seen this? Did you see this update? Have you seen this? And pretty soon we had this big bucket of resources. So I'm sorry, Tom,
as you mentioned, you're all CMPs, and Eliz and I both have the virtual certified virtual presenter certification, and I have my CSP, which is the National Speakers Association's certified speaking professional. So this accreditation that you're having, how do you hope it will grow within the meetings business so that people will have it as they go to hybrid and in-person meetings? How do you hope it will impact our industry?
I think that one's for Heather.
Sure, I'll take that one. I think that what's interesting about this course is it's twofold, essentially. First and foremost, you're becoming a pandemic compliance advisor. So you have that certificate behind your name. But secondly, as meeting professionals, you're understanding why you need a PCA on site with you and why you should hire a PCA and not assume the role while you're running a meeting. You can't be in both places at the same time. So I think that is one piece of it. Second, as Shannon started talking about, was the resources. So through all the education that Marianne and Shannon and I have taken, all the resources that we've seen, all of our industry press, all the articles, we're collecting all of that into a living database or a living resource library that anybody that takes the course has access to. So even though they may have taken the course in October, they can still access resources that we're adding in February, March, January as we move forward. Second to that too, is they're added now to a database of PCAs. So when you're a meeting professional looking to hire somebody to be on site with you, you have a whole database of people that can be with you. And then it really was another way to kind of get our industry back to work as well, of creating this role for people to fill because of what's happened to the meetings and events industry.
So tell me a little bit about how anybody can jump in on this one, how that would work. So I'm going to pretend I'm putting on my meeting professional hat and I'm planning an event. What you're saying is I should not be the person who's in charge of that compliance. There should be a whole separate person who is just keeping an eye on that. Why is that important?
I'll jump in on that one. I'm sorry. So the scenario that I give in class is if you've ever been on site, you know that you're troubleshooting constantly. And to be in charge of a meeting session that gets out maybe a little bit early and your F&B is running behind and your AV is running behind and you've got sessions out early and you're in charge of all of this and overseeing all your teams and communicating all that, and then somebody comes up to you and says, I'm not feeling well. So that's a direct conflict of interest. What do you do? How do you deal with this person who's suddenly not feeling well and deal with everything else you have going on? So it really is too big of a position to be allocated to the planner who's overseeing everything else.
That's really, I hadn't thought about it like that, but that is very, very true. If you're running around putting out fires all day long, and I can imagine if now you have to go off and deal with that, everything else is going to fall apart. What would it look like at an event to have somebody who's a dedicated PCA at the event? Head meeting planner is running around putting out all of those fires all day long. What does that PCA do?
Your PCA is going to go ahead and ensure that the health and safety checks are done. So it's that new aspect to the meeting. And it's new in that while we're in COVID right now, we've made changes, and this is going to change our industry moving forward. There's going to be hand sanitizer stations. There's going to be reasons to have social distancing. Even with the vaccine coming in, there's still going to be a need for masks for a while. We don't know what that time frame is. So the PCA is the person that's going to be taking care of all of that, so that the planner can go be ahead and making sure that the AV is running, that the speakers are where they should be, that, your meal rooms are going to have to be different too. Your meal room's going to have to be separate. You're not going to, truly, it's not going to be that you're having a working lunch anymore. You're going to have to go off somewhere. Your break's not going to be right outside of your meeting room anymore, because you don't want to necessarily put all of your people in that space in your hallway. And so you're going to have to move them somewhere else. So your PCA is going to be taking care of all of those other things, making sure they're all in place so that your planner can make sure that the logistics and the execution is going.
So how does this impact when we get COVID under control? And while I don't think that's going to be this year, I do believe that there will come a time where we can say, do you remember when we were in that global pandemic? How does what you've put together as a course for the meetings industry, how does this carry forward now beyond the COVID situation?
This is my favorite question, and I love giving this answer every time, and I'm always jumping on it in our class. But just because COVID goes away doesn't mean that health issues don't go away. And Marianne touched on it a little bit, that I think now as planners and as our audience comes back to meetings, I think the tolerance for sickness is going to be much lower than it was before. So our meetings are going to need to be healthy regardless, or being planned in a more healthy way. Behind the COVID is the flu. So everything that you're learning in the course can also be applied during flu season. Who knows what else is around the corner? In 2019, we had a measles outbreak. So this is just one health problem that we're experiencing. It's our biggest one probably in the lifetime of many of us right now. But just because we have that under control doesn't mean there's something that isn't already present or that isn't right behind it. that we're going to have to be planning for. So I think, as Marianne said, hand sanitizer will no longer be, it would be a nice to have. It's now a must have at our programs. No more are we going to be setting 3 for 6. We're probably going to be, a minimum 2 for 6 once we're back to closeness, being able to be closer together. I think people are going to try to be, 2 for 8. So that way there's even more space between people. As we are able to start alleviating and getting rid of these 6-foot restrictions once we come out of COVID. So I think these things will stay in our brains and be able to be used once we're out of the COVID scare. But yeah, there's still going to be sickness out there.
Right. I was just talking about this with my husband, in that we've all been in a meeting where you hear the person a couple of rows back, coughing up a lung, and you're like,
Yeah.
why are you here?
Or on the airplane, same thing. It's like,
exactly.
No,
I think that's the thing, is that now your audience is even going to be more vocal of coming up and be like, somebody has a cough, we might want to get them checked out. So again, you're going to have to be aware of what's going on and understand those sensitivities and understand how to handle sick attendees as well, even when it's not COVID.
And, too, we speak about a code of conduct. And I think that's something that people are needing to update, because we are all responsible for taking care of each other. But in doing so, we need to have a standard for that. So I think that's something that's going to be enduring as well as the code of conduct, to say, I'm responsible for me, but I'm also responsible for you. And one of those things is going to be, if you're sick, you're staying home.
Right.
And then it's also organizations looking at things along the lines of, how do we go ahead, and if it's a paid meeting, how do we go ahead and handle refunds or things like that if I do get sick? And being a little bit more sensitive and I'm going to say warm and inviting, to say, we don't really want you at the meeting if you're sick, so we want to be more understanding.
Right. But that's a tough thing, I would imagine, to plan for. That if you're an association and you make a lot of your budget off of your annual meeting, and now you're saying, oh, well, we're going to have a policy that refunds money to people who are sick because we want to keep everybody else healthy. That might be a tough thing to sell to your board of directors or your membership. Is that an area where a pandemic compliance advisor might be handy to sort of be not necessarily the bad guy, but maybe the grown-up in the room sort of thing?
It certainly depends on when you enlist your pandemic compliance advisor. But it's part of risk management. If you look at this on a bigger scale, it's risk management, and it's also kind of looking ahead. It's one of those intangible ROIs. You want your people to come back. You want your people to participate. You want them to understand that you do care, not just about them, but about everybody else in the room. So yeah, it may be a tough discussion with the board of directors, but it's been a really tough year plus.
So yeah. So we didn't talk about this in preparation for the call. So this might not be something that you guys address with your certification, or maybe it's something you'll address later. But one of the things that I think will be around for a long time is this concept of the hybrid meeting. So in your, awareness and your teaching, do you give people best practices on how to engage the at-home audience who might be watching through video, and still keeping the in-person portion safe and exciting and engaging too? Is that something you address in this program? Is the hybrid idea?
Not really. We don't talk about it in terms of, how to keep your at-home audience engaged. Rather, we talk about offering hybrid as an option for those people who may be high risk. And maybe it's not a good time for them to be coming right now, or maybe they can't wear a mask. Maybe they have medical issues. So we talk about hybrid more from the aspect of a value added, maybe a bonus for those people who would
An
like
accommodation.
to be there.
Mm,
Accommodation. There you go.
right. Um, I like that idea of accommodation because there are right now. I'm a high risk population person, so I'm not going anywhere. I do appreciate that there are those virtual options right now, and hopefully they'll continue into the future. But we've always had people who, for one reason or another, can't attend our in-person meetings. I think the benefit, there's benefits to even difficult things. The benefit of this whole experience with COVID is we've all gotten pretty good at this virtual thing. So
Yeah, hybrid is not going away. That's our next disruption that we're going to be having here in the meetings industry. Of course, COVID's been a disruption, but now, so we went from live events, many associations, live events to virtual events, and now we need to do hybrid. And many associations didn't do hybrid before because of cost implications, but now we can't afford not to do hybrid events because we've seen travel budgets cut. We've seen our industry, all of our exhibitors are pharmaceutical or medical device companies, so their travel budgets have been cut. They're not going to come back overnight. That's going to take time, but we still want to be able to capture that audience. And some people, like you said, we're doing business via Zoom now. So people are used to doing it that way. I think that hybrid, at least for the next 5 years, is going to be a staple for us until we see, we got to climb back out of what's happened here to our industry. So it's not a want anymore. It's a need to be able to do this.
right.
And you're right. It is complicated because in some ways it's like planning a whole second concurrent event. Eliz and I started hosting the virtual version of hybrid events like 7 years ago, and nobody really took it seriously. They didn't want to invest in that home audience. And what we've learned now because of this pandemic is, wow, the at-home audience, if done well, can be engaged and profitable. So, I think that's important.
You're planning one event with two experiences is what it is.
Exactly.
Yes.
We say it's like an NFL football game. There are different people who worry about the TV audience than worry about the in stadium audience, and yet both are the same event. So it's an interesting thing. So shifting back to your accreditation, what has been the response from our meetings industry?
It's been good. We aren't allowed to discuss how many people have attended.
Okay.
But the response has been good, very favorable. And we have a course at the end of this month. And we have one scheduled for February as well.
Well, I hope you continue to do them because I would really like to take one because I think just from, Tom and I talk about speakers being part of the meeting industry. I wouldn't imagine that I would become a PCA, but having that information and being able to discuss why it's so important to have a PCA at your event is something I think is a value add as a speaker that we can give to the industry. Yeah. If somebody is watching this and thinking, holy cow, I really need to do that, how would they find the information on that?
You could head to the Health Education Services website, and underneath their website, you'll see courses, and there's a drop-down menu, and you'll find our course there. The other important thing to know is, we touched on this briefly, if you are a CMP or you're studying for your CMP, we are accredited for 3 CEs through the Education Industry Council. So that's a benefit to get 3 CEs for your recertification or to even get ready for sitting for your CMP or your CMP HC.
Fantastic. And we'll put the link in the show notes so people can find it.
And thank you to the three of you for being here and sharing this. I'm hoping that lots of people in our meetings industry who didn't know about this will look into it and find it, because I think we all win when this information gets widely shared. So thanks for all you've done, and thanks for being here with Eliz and I on the Webinar Talk Show.
Absolutely. And thanks for reaching out and letting us know about this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Tom, this is an unusual week. We're only going to have
It
one
is.
show this week.
We only did today, which is Monday. We usually do Monday and Wednesday, but this Wednesday at 11 Central, 12 Eastern, is the inauguration of the 46th President of the United States, Joe Biden. And you and I both want to be watching that, as we think our audience all should be watching that. So,
Because
alas,
we're
not doing a show.
I watch every inauguration, no matter who it is.
I went to an inauguration, and I have to tell you, I don't care what party you support, or even if your candidate doesn't win. Obviously, this year you can't attend because of the pandemic, but attending the live inauguration and some of the balls was one of the highlights of any activity I've ever done in my life. And I'm very, very proud that I had the opportunity to experience it. So I watch them all on TV too, even if I don't like the winner.
Absolutely. So no talk show on Wednesday, but we will be back on Monday with Jensen Lapley to talk about how to communicate your message in a viral sort of way. I'm very excited to talk to him. You can find us at webinartalkshow.com if you'd like to know more about how Tom and I do this and the way that we work with clients and make their events more fun, more interesting, more engaging. Because, as we say, a talking head over PowerPoint is not quite as engaging as a fun interview, right, Tom?
Right, and we just saw what a fun interview can be, even when you have 3 people on the panel. This was a great show, and I think share this show with all your friends in the meetings industry, because this is the important information that we talk about.
Indeed, and catch us on most Mondays and Wednesdays at 11 o'clock Central Time at webinartalkshow.live. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for sharing and for all the work that you're doing to really benefit the meetings industry. Thank you so much. Everybody have a great day. We'll see you next week. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.